Welcome, everyone, to the One More Game podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darcy, and with me is the California Thirst Quencher, Pete Legia. Pete, how you doing, man?
Prepping for the end game on, with Twitter. That seems like maybe or maybe not it's going to go down and it's going to implode because Elon Musk has closed the doors on the company for until the 21st, apparently. And, now apparently the inmates are running out of the asylum, quote unquote. So getting my Instagram orders in wares in order and culling my Facebook a little bit, just trying to clean up my other ones since I've mostly spent my social media presence on Twitter, which may not last for very much longer.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how everything with like Twitter and the sale and just what's transpired from there has caused so much like things that you just did not expect.
I think everybody who had half a sense with Elon Musk kind of expected it because he's an ignoramus. If you want, look, I'm not shy about my opinions of billionaires, but if you want anything about billionaires or bullshit, like all you gotta do is look at Twitter. Dude pays $44 billion for a website that's not worth anywhere near that because it doesn't make any money, and then crashes and burns it within a month. Basically because he got annoyed at a bunch of people making fun of him on Twitter because he's a billionaire.
Yeah. So. Well, and what I meant by, I should say, is like no one thought to happen is just like if someone had a 2022 bingo card and no one would have saw like what transpired in the last month as you described happening. And that's why I'm saying like no one saw this coming because it was just like completely out of left field. And yeah, it is definitely interesting. But hey, you know what? If it crashes, like you said, there's other social medias out there, and there's also Evil Dead the game is free on Epic Game Store, and I know that because I have an ad right in front of me. Exactly, we'll still be here. So everybody, welcome to the One More Game podcast. This is a podcast centered around making sure you're informed about all the video game news happening around the world, whether it is Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. If there's news that you need to know about, we'll make sure that you know about it. When you're listening to this on your podcast service, make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what your service offers. And if your podcast service allows reviews, please leave a 5-star review and tell everyone why you love the One More Game podcast, because we really enjoy bringing this to you each and every week. If you'd like to be part of the show by asking a question or suggesting a topic for discussion, head on over to pressstartnews.net/onemore game and fill out that submission form, and your submission could be used on the next episode. Or when we are normally recording this live over on youtube.com/pressstart28, you could drop your stuff off in the chat and we'll read them live as they come up. But we are recording this a little early, and we're also recording this, of course, not streaming it because just how our week has been. I was not able to schedule a time, and we kind of just were like, hey, tonight works, let's do it. So we're recording this on a Thursday night. But if this is your first time to the podcast, welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy your listen, and I hope you enjoy your stay. But if you are returning, you already know what it is. We start off every single podcast talking about what we've been playing lately. So, Pete, what have you been playing lately?
I got 2 games for you this week.
Ooh,
first one will be really short. So as people probably know, last week, my personal childhood got a massive kick in the gut. Because the legendary Kevin Conroy, the voice actor for Batman since the Batman the Animated Series from like 1992, so 30 years essentially of him being the voice of Batman in, like, I think I saw it was like over 60 different projects. That I don't know how accurate that number is. He was in Batman for a lot of projects, so so I had to download Batman Arkham Asylum. I had it on my Epic Game Store account. I think I got it for free. It was for free at some point, and I scooped up that. I think Arkham City was also a part of that, something like that. So I downloaded that, started playing that. Just an awesome game. Just you're going through it. You hear Mark Hamill's Joker. You hear Kevin Conroy as Batman. Just great. All the characters are awesome. It's a nice like adult version of Batman, which is unique in the sense of like Kevin Conroy, he did the cartoons a lot. So some of the movies like Mask of the Phantasm, Return of the Joker, were a little bit more of an adult kind of style, but most of them were more cartoony, more for kids. But even if they had serious undertones, so it was interesting to see. I go back and see some of the characters again in a more serious environment. I guess more modern, if you want to call it that. So that was really cool. Probably going to play that a little bit more before I finally get off of it and get bored. And Jeremy, you're going to be so happy because the next game, because it goes into our topic. I went to my cousin's the other day. We're hanging out when my car was getting worked on, and I played Elden Ring for the first time. Played Elden Ring. Played it for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So very light touch, very light dabbling in it. It was an interesting experience. It's one of those games where I don't know if it's for me. I'd have to actually play it a little more, like probably have another few hours before I actually feel like I've gotten like a solid decision of whether or not it was for me or not. I was very strongly considering acquiring it if I could find like a used copy or something like that. But it is very clear it is a incredibly well constructed game. Everything looks the part. The music and the atmosphere, everything's really good. The story, I didn't really get a whole lot into a story that may or may not be there, as we were talking about before the podcast. So it's a little frustrating because I already play games where I lose a lot, the card games, because, there's randomness and stuff like that. So I don't know if I want another game where I can just like, hey, I'm just basically banging my head against the wall until finally the wall falls over. And because I figure out the puzzle, there was some satisfaction doing some of the parts where I kept dying in the 90 minutes or so that I played. But also it was like against like goblins and stuff. And I'm just like, I kind of feel like this shouldn't be this difficult with like, basic enemies and stuff like that, I feel like it should be more like the big, I had to face this like soldier of Godfrick or Godlick or something like that.
Godwick,
like it's like one of the first is like one of the first bosses, and I died the first time, and I was like those things I could like probably be like, okay, I could understand like having to do that, but like then I'm like running through like a labyrinth and like, oh hey, there's goblins, and sometimes they just jump out from like a corner and like they have a sickle and they just slice through your guard and you die, and it's like, okay, well that's not quite as interesting or entertaining. That just seems kind of annoying. So I don't know. This is exactly the kind of game where I'd want to try before you buy kind of thing, which I guess I kind of did because, I was at my cousin's and played it. But I could tell it's a very, very well constructed game. I can understand why it has a lot of fans, and I can understand why, as we're going to talk about, it has a lot of awards for game game of the year and other qualities like that. I think it was like 7 nominees in the Game Awards. So, also, this isn't a game, but because it's a battle, I got my Austin 316 shirt on.
There you
Stone
go.
Cold, Austin 316 says, because we're going to have a headbutt and a battle between all these games as they have a free-for-all to try to figure out who's reigns dominant in these categories.
Yeah, and we'll of course get to those all coming up here in a little bit. But I gotta just say, because of course you played it now, and obviously I played it over summer. I think it was back in June when I grabbed it or whatever for a little bit, and you kind of see what I was talking about, where it's like, I wanted to like it so much. And like for me, it's like I could not click with Elden Ring when I play it. I keep saying it similarly. I want to go back and like give it another try at some point, because I know, as you said, like you can tell the game is really good, but it's just something about it that just didn't click with me. And I think for me, it was the open world aspect that they added to it, because I like the other From Software games, but they're more like linear in a sense. Like they have some like directionless aspects where you can kind of go anywhere, but like in a sense, like you got to go one direction and there you go. Like you're gonna run into the boss. Whereas Elden Ring, like I said, I kind of ran everywhere and I couldn't find anything. But yeah, I'm happy that you finally played it. But I do have to say, don't feel bad about getting killed by some of the most basic enemies, because like everyone pretty much dies to some basic enemies at some point in the From Software games because of how they hide them or they overwhelm you type of thing. So I mean, like, it's not that big of a deal.
Going to the open world aspect that you were talking about, really quick, that's probably the thing I want to play more of it the most, because my cousin was kind of guiding me to get to the first dungeon. So like I didn't really experience the open world aspect as much, but I did up until he told me like, hey, go to this thing and it'll tell you where to go. There was like okay, what am I supposed to do kind of thing. So I do remember, but it was only very minimum. I didn't even think about it until you brought it up. But yeah, I can totally understand. Like it's like, I always make fun of people when they go to a buffet and they're like, I don't know what to get. And it's like, there's so much selection. But in this case, it's kind of just like you're given so much to do or you're given so much choice that it's like you kind of your brain just kind of like freezes. Like, I don't understand. Like, what am I supposed to do? That's always been my problem with games like Minecraft, honestly, is that it's just like, you can do everything. I'm like, well, I don't want to do anything.
Yeah. Sometimes that is the case, right? When you have, it's similarly to with picking a video game to play on a certain night, right? It's like when you have too many options, sometimes it becomes, you get overwhelmed and you're like, I don't want to do any of the options, like, because I can't choose a single option, type of thing. So I totally get that sense, because it happens to me quite often. For myself, I didn't play a whole lot of games this week, understandably so, because I had to work like crazy this past weekend. I did track it. I worked 41 hours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to make it happen. Which off the podcast, I told you we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. So I'll just I'll tell everyone.
Got one story that you gotta share though. Come on, since you don't have a game, you got a story.
Well, I do have a game. I was just saying I didn't play a lot. I didn't play a lot. But just at the grand scheme of things, there were some hiccups with the event. However, the event went really well, and I want to say like shout outs to the Keyforge community for being so nice and welcoming to me at the event. That was the kind of the coolest part, is having so many people coming up and thanking like me personally for all the hard work I did to make the event happen. So that was kind of the cool thing. It wasn't just like, hey, good job Ghost Galaxy. It was like, hey, good job Jeremy. So that made me feel really good. The game though that I did play, because I have been trying to get through or like get to playing games and getting a review or some sort of video out on this game, because I did get this code from the publisher in wanting them to have me create some content, and I just have not been able to because of work. But I went, and this week I've been playing a lot of Lost Eidolons. So those that might remember, Lost Eidolons is a strategy RPG game that came from Ocean Drive Studios, which is an indie studio from I want to say Taiwan. I'm not 100% sure on that actually, but it's either Taiwan or Indonesia. But they created this really cool indie RPG that I was really looking forward to. The strategy RPG deals with the main character is Eden, or Eden. I think it's Eden, and his compadres, and basically they're forced out of their homeland because a lord that was there was killed, and a lot of people basically landed on their hands, saying that they did it. So I been playing that a little bit, and I'm enjoying it. As I did before, I told many people that was my like most looked forward to indie title of the year, and it's continuing to do very well. And I want to also give a shout out to Ocean Drive Studios for the work that they're doing post launch, because this is a single player game, and it of course is an indie team, so they could theoretically ship it. It sold fairly, pretty well for them. At least it seems to point to that they've sold pretty well. However, they have been putting out a lot of updates and making adjustments to improve the game even though it's released. Like, it's not even in early access. So one of the things that they have already put out there that it's going to be doing is they're redoing how the story gets told. So currently the characters like do this whole like fade in and they kind of talk and do this animation. They fade out and then the other character appears on the screen and fades in. And they're changing that to so it's not a fade in, fade out, but it's actually just like the other characters will appear. So like the character will disappear and the character that's talking will be in their place. And that might seem like a minor change, but there is like this weird, awkward pauses that do happen because of this whole fade out and fade in that they've already showed a sample video of the update that helps with that storytelling pacing. And there's a number of other changes they're already making to the game to try and improve it more. And so I just want to give a shout out for that because I think that that's fairly awesome. But the game's fun. It's been if you like strategy RPGs, the combat is really good. The storytelling is kind of hit and miss at the moment, and that I kind of figured it happens at times with indie RPGs because they just don't have the budget to pour into the story aspects. But voice acting is really good. The character animations they've done is solid in my opinion, but again, the combat is kind of the king there, and I'm really enjoying it, and I cannot wait to dive more into it and then finally put out a video so Ocean Drive Studios feels good about the fact that they gave me a copy.
Hell yeah. I did just send you a message, but it does look like they are from South Korea.
South Korea, like, okay.
According to their LinkedIn.
That makes sense, and everyone might have just seen the whole thing adjust on our cameras, but that was on me.
Oh, my bad.
No, that was on me. Yeah. But yeah, I knew, of course, they were an Asian studio. And that was like something that some people like were, I remember from their announcement that was like a little interesting because the fact the game basically takes place in like a European setting. So some people found that part interesting. So that's why I kind of knew that part aspect. But it's a lot of fun. I think it's like $35 on Steam, unless it's on sale right now. But totally worth going to go check out. And yeah. That's pretty much it. So let's get into the game catalog, which I say game because we only have one thing that we're really talking about today because we've been talking about other games for quite a bit of time, and that is we're talking all things Game Awards. So, of course, the nominees came out earlier this week, going through the listings of the various titles and, of course, categories. There are, as always, roughly 30-ish categories every year, and this year, of course, we have 31 categories, ranging all the way from Game of the Year down to the best esports event or best esports coach as well. So we're going to go through these and kind of talk about our thoughts and sentiments, but let's start, Pete. I know we talked beforehand about how we wanted to tackle this and what we wanted to do, and I brought up a story that you alluded to a little bit earlier when you were talking about Elden Ring. And I want to start there because I think that is like kind of a good starting point. And then we'll go through the categories. So let's just start at that aspect, which is we're talking about best narrative in this instance. And best narrative is listed as for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game. And the categories or the nominees were A Plague's Tale Requiem, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Immortality, and then the last one was Elden Ring. Now, this sparked a big discussion that was going on Twitter that I noticed from people that I follow specifically. And a lot of people, understandably so, have no problems with the fact that A Plague's Tale Requiem is there, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, or Immortality, especially Immortality since it's an FMV type of game, obviously all story. But there was a big pushback with the fact that Elden Ring got announced, and so many people were like, where is the narrative in this game? And it sparked this big discussion about whether Elden Ring tells a story, a narrative, or does it just have lore? And so, Pete, you had an interesting perspective. Again, you haven't dove into this a whole lot, but we were kind of detailing, kind of some of the discussions back and forth about this, and you had an interesting thought of it. So I just want to ask you, for you, where do you feel narrative and lore are separate, and where do you feel they're the same?
Well, I guess the way to start this up, you might have heard me typing a little bit. I pull up the literal definitions for narrative and lore. So the definition for narrative is a spoken or written account of connected events, a story. Lore is a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person and by word of mouth. So I think the difference. I think I guess we'll start with the similarities, rather. I think the similarities are they're both part of a story. Is the story of what has happened, whereas narrative is the story of, like, theoretically what is going on right now. But it's really hard in a lot of cases to tell a narrative without having some sort of lore. You have to. I feel like you have to have some kind of some kind of backdrop. You have a background to tell your story. You can't just have a blank sheet of paper and just write things on a sheet on paper and it's like, oh well, that's a story. There has to be a rhyme or reason for the words that are being on there, and a lot of that has to do with like stuff that maybe you're referencing. Maybe like you do little tiny things of like you're in a war torn world, or even just minor things of like, or in a lighter sense, even just minor things, talking about how you're in the kitchen. You're talking, so you need a backdrop, and that kind of stuff is more like lore, it feels like, but it's also imperative to tell a narrative. Like I said, it's just really hard to have that backdrop. So, or to tell a narrative without the backdrop. So it was really odd to me that there was this. It kind of almost seems like the words are interchangeable. It's really odd to me that there was like this big argument going on about it. It feels like maybe there was a not like a confusion of translation, but a confusion of like what particular words mean for certain people. I'm gonna be upfront. I didn't play. I talked about I only played a little bit of Elden Ring, so I wouldn't have gotten into a story or a narrative whether there is one or not one. But just because there's not like an in-your-face story doesn't mean there's a narrative going on. Because even the little bit I got from Elden Ring specifically, you seem to be this group of characters called Tarnished, which may or may not be either directly related or indirectly related to these other heroes that used to be alive before. And so you're telling this story in the sense of like a lot of the story might be told through lore, through things that have already happened. But in that sense, the one who's writing the narrative in that case is you, the player, right? You're making the decisions, you're making the choices. Those are what impacts the story. Those are what impacts. So now, should it have been nominated for a narrative in that sense? I'm not 100% sure. I would have had to play the other games. I could probably make some inferences on what Plague's story narrative is, for instance, because I played quite a bit of the original earlier this year. We discussed as one of the games I talked about. So in that sense, I don't know if it should have been nominated, but a lot of these games just get nominated for a lot of they get nominated for a lot of categories just because they're super popular, and it's kind of the same thing with movies. How a lot of movies just get nominated for like Oscars. They get like 10 Oscars if they're really popular or really critically acclaimed, just because that's just how a lot of those movies, like if they're good in one thing, a lot of they're good in one thing, they're probably good in several other character categories, because a lot of the categories also overlap. Because like if you're a game of the year, you're probably also like, it's not just the gameplay that makes you game of the year, right? It's probably the setting, it's probably also the story, the character interactions, the
It's
characters
like the
themselves.
complete picture.
It's the complete picture, correct. So if you're game of the year you're probably going to be nominated for a lot of other things in that sense. So I think it's interesting. I guess I would use the word interesting to have an argument for that. I don't know your opinion specifically. We didn't really go over there. It was more just me giving my 2 cents on it because I'm very opinionated because I'm an asshole like that. But
Well, that's why you're on a podcast.
that's true. You have to be an asshole to be on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Quote of the year right there. Book it. But that's it was just interesting that so many people seem to be rather upset by that. Just because and also like another thing is like a lot of times the narratives also have meaning for different people, different meanings for different people, not just the definition, but like a story that you and I might, if you and I both see a movie, especially if we're not together, but we both see the same movie, it might speak to us in different ways, and the narrative might talk to us in different ways just because we saw the same movie. I mean, look at Star Wars, how many people interpret Star Wars differently, for instance, or Star Trek or any of that stuff. Just because like a group, you could a large group of people, like 10, you have 10 people see the same thing. They're not all going to give you the same answer. You might get 10 different answers for all you can tell. So it's kind of really fascinating, I guess, in the sense of like how people interpret. Also, just from a more meta standpoint, how much people are super opinionated when they get really annoyed and something that they disagree with, especially on social media, right?
I
It's
mean,
another like more meta thing for that, but
come on. Like, let's just also point this out there, Pete. Same thing with you. You know?
100%.
Like, I'm just saying.
Like we established, I'm an asshole, so
I know. I'm just saying. I'm just using the stance of like, obviously, Pete. There's like. You're unique to me, but at the same time, so many people are going to be the similar way. Like, they're going to get opinionated even on things that they don't like fully, understand. So I'm not a huge surprise about it, but I also will say, of course, like we're talking gamers, right? And gamers have such a loyalist mindset when it comes to various things. It's why we still have huge console war discussions going on all the time, even when people like you and myself, like we own multiple consoles. We obviously clearly like multiple things. Like it's totally fine to feel that way, but some people are like, no, it's not. So I will say though, like, because my standpoint on this is I understand what people are saying when it comes to the thought of does Elden Ring actually tell a narrative, storytelling, in a sense, or is it just lore based? Because how From Software tells their games, at least in the Soulsborne series, so of course, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, 1 through 3, Elden Ring, is a lot of it has already happened, has already occurred, and it is you find out about things through reading the various notes and books that are around in the map or in as you traverse, or the NPCs telling you about the old, like what's happened already. And like that's how it conveys the setting and story to you. And that's why a lot of people, yes, they look at it as lore. And so many people, whether they're right or wrong, look at the storytelling or the narrative aspect is the here and now. And they think of it as in the character discussions between the player and another NPC, as well as, of course, the drive to carry out whatever story is supposed to be there. Like let's use JRPGs, for instance, right? Like the world is about to end because of some evil like villain church and we got to go stop it, right? And so like that's like a lot of people look at that as the storytelling, whereas like in Elden Ring, for instance, you kind of don't have a soul like driving purpose that's in your face saying this is why you must go and kill all these like bosses. It's just the fact you're like, well, it's a video game and I want to go challenge myself, so I'm going to go kill these bosses. But there's not that like driving force like in God of War Ragnarok, obviously, as you talked about with the Plague's Tale, or in this instance, of course, a Plague Tale Requiem, Horizon Forbidden West, things like that. And Immortality, again, I talked about it. It's an FMV, which it's on Game Pass. And I know I haven't played it myself, but I know a lot of people say it's amazing. So I do recommend going to check that out to see if it vibes with you as well. So I get it, but personally, I don't see the problem with it being nominated as a narrative. Now, if it was me, I do think there are better games narratively to put here than it is for Elden Ring, but I still see it because From Software does their lore so well that, like, it is very interesting if you dive into it. But the part is you have to dive into it. If you don't dive into it, you're not really going to experience the world or the settings or all that jazz. And that's always, I think, the hard part for some people to decipher with. But as you said, this is why I love the Game Awards. Let me preface what I'm about to say. I love the Game Awards. I think the Game Awards is amazing, and I really, really wish I could go there. I mean, I even looked up tickets recently where Pete actually lives near.
So did I.
Pete lives close enough that he could have actually gone, but he has to apparently work that night, so I'm not as upset about it.
You were about to throw me under the bus. I wasn't.
I was about to throw you under the bus. Yes,
really about to. I was like, no. Get out of here. Maybe next year.
Yeah, but this is also my gripe with the Game Awards because it is open to voting to the general public. And what is going to happen is a lot of these voting categories will not actually go to games that I think actually deserve them. Like I know that there are other game awards. There's tons of game awards out there. So like the Game Awards is just one in a, sea of award shows. But this is why I prefer the Game Award categories that are voted on by industry people, because of the fact of that you're actually judged by the jury of your peers versus where it's a population vote, a popularity vote. And sometimes games that should not win, in my opinion, do win because they're just more popular. Now, the one caveat I want to say, last year's Game of the Year winner, It Takes Two, caught me totally off by surprise. I know that it was a very popular game, but I did not expect that Indies EA original type game to come out and win against like Deathloop. And I don't remember what the other ones were last year, but like I really thought Deathloop was going to win because of Bethesda being we couldn't look it up, but I really thought Deathloop was going to win because of it being like the most popular on the list. And so when It Takes Two won, I was very, very surprised by it. Did you find out what it went up against last year?
2 seconds. It Takes Two was the winner, like you said. Deathloop, Metroid Dread, Psychonauts 2, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and Resident Evil Village were the other nominees.
Yeah, I thought it was going to come down to Resident Evil Village and Deathloop. In all honesty, and this is not to crap on those games, that was not a very good list of Game of the Year nominees last year.
I mean, honestly, ours is kind of weak once we get to it.
I disagree. I disagree. Let's jump right into it. Let's jump right into it. So we're going straight into the Game of the Year nominees, and of course, this is for those that don't know, it's the category that recognizes a game that delivers the absolute best experience across all creative and technical fields. And the nominees this year are A Plague Tale: Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War: Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Pete, how do you not think that this is a fairly good listing of nominees?
Well, first off, the Xenoblade Chronicles 3, even the fans seem surprised that it was nominated.
Well, I want to say that real quick. I want to jump in with that one. That's because almost every time in a Game of the Year, at least at the Game Awards, a JRPG is not on the list. So the fact Xenoblade Chronicles 3 made it was like, holy crap. They're actually, one, Xenoblade is actually getting the recognition it deserves, but two, a lot of people for many years, including myself, says Monolith Soft is one of the best, if not the best, Nintendo developers in Nintendo's umbrella, and they're finally getting their flowers, as you always say. So that's why so many people were like, holy crap, Xenoblade's there.
Give them their flowers. I don't know, even if you want to give it to Xenoblade, I feel like as good as Stray was, I don't know if that was Game of the Year material.
I agree.
Plague Tale Requiem, I think that appeals to kind of a more niche audience as well. Look, I'm not saying the top of this list isn't big. God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring would be like on most, if not all, Game of the Year awards
And
lists.
Forbidden West.
And Horizon Forbidden West would be on a lot of them too. It just feels very top heavy, I guess I should say. Should say as a weak list. I'll take it back. It's not like a weak list. It's the top heavy list. I feel like that this is a list made. It's like we want 6 games. We don't want the best games on the list, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It feels like they had to fill a quota for their nominees. I think personally, also this is probably a 2-horse race. Horizon Forbidden West is probably a dark horse. Although I will say, I mean, like you said, this is a public vote, so maybe something comes up out of nowhere. I think this is mostly probably going to be between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. Those are my 2 guesses. I wouldn't even say those 100%. Are my games. I'm not even going to say those are my games of the year. Obviously, I haven't even played God of War Ragnarok. Would like to. But I've only played a little bit of Elden Ring. So those not, but I would assume it's got to be one of those 2. Like if we were going to put odds on it, those are got to be the 2 favorites, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So those would be the ones that I would probably put money down if we were betting men, which I am not, even though it was stupid that Vegas had the Packers -3 tonight. That was ridiculous. I cannot believe that they let them do that, but that's not here nor there. I don't know why anybody's having the Packers give any points. Anyway, we're not betting men though, so we're not betting men. We don't care.
I love that we threw some random football in here. That's just perfect.
Well, you were wearing your Bears. I feel like it was like obligated, you know.
That is true.
So, you seem like you're. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying this is my it is winter time now, so I wear a sweatshirt inside my house.
Well, you know how we roll. It was like 70 degrees in winter over here, so I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you're in Minnesota, where I'm in SoCal, so you know. So you had some different opinions. Obviously, we already kind of clashed with the Austin 316 on the Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Do you have any differing opinions on some of these other games, possibly?
Oh, yeah, totally. So the first thing I have to say is A Plague Tale Requiem. Please keep in mind for those listeners, and this is not to call out Pete, because I do want to say, though, Pete is a great podcast co-host. I love this guy to death, but he didn't follow video games as closely until I dragged his happy butt here into this co-host seat. Please remember, A Plague Tale: Innocence was nominated for a Game of the Year awards because of how blown away people were by that game. Sure. And I want to say that's why I haven't played A Plague Tale Requiem yet. I know it's going to be a good game, but I do know it wasn't received received as well as Innocence was. Do keep in mind, Asobo Studio is a smaller studio still. It's not like they're it's a AAA experience, but it is not at the levels of like Guerrilla Games, Sony Santa Monica, From Software, things like that. So I think that Requiem is here because of how well Innocence was received, that it basically, like, the hype was there for Requiem, and it delivered enough to bring its name into the fold here. Horizon Forbidden West, unfortunately for Horizon, it has the worst timing to release every year. I will say that, because Horizon Zero Dawn, which many people thought was fully capable of winning Game of the Year, I don't remember exactly what title it was, but it released at the same year as another PlayStation game, and I want to say it was the Uncharted 4, if I remember correctly. And
I'll take a look. You keep talking.
And it lost, even though, like, it was right there with it. And again, this is another year where I think if it was like, if Horizon Forbidden West released last year, like it originally I think was planned, I think it would have won Game of the Year. But this year, it's definitely always going to get overlooked by God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring. And so, like you said, Pete, this list always will come down to that two-headed horse. Does Elden Ring with its how well it was received and blown away by people stay in the limelight because it released so early in the year? And then God of War Ragnarok, how well does that do with the fact it had so much hype heading into it and delivered, but it's recent, and recent memory always can trump sometimes even the best of games earlier in the year. What was the game? Because I think you were looking it up for me. What was the game that released with Horizon Zero Dawn?
So I don't know what game. I don't know what game exactly released with it, but the year for the Game Awards, the year that it came out, it released the same year as Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, which I don't think any game was ever beating that ever. It's like one of the most
Yes.
highly rated game of all time. And then you also had Persona 5, Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, PUBG rather, and then Super Mario Odyssey. But I mean, like, I don't think anybody was beating Legend of
Yeah,
Zelda: Breath
I
of the
think it
Wild.
was that. Like I said, I think it was like it was one of those things where it was like if it released in any other year, it probably would have had a chance to actually win. But it released in a year where it was always going to be trumped, and this is a similar situation. It released in a year where if it was any other year, it probably has a chance to win.
I think it might have actually been Breath of the Wild that overtook it in general because it was released North America the 28th of February in 2017 and March 3rd, Legend of Zelda
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild came out. So it might have just been overtaken the entire time. That's unfortunate.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
they
Which
got
is
more of a
similar.
complaint than they got
Which
more
is
of a complaint than Battlefield did.
which is
When they
similar
went
with
into
Elden Ring. I think Horizon Forbidden West released either right after or right before Elden Ring, and like Elden Ring just like overshadowed it this year. But I do agree with you. I haven't played Stray. I know that Stray was really well received, and a lot of people were hyped for it, myself included. I still got to go and play it, but like I don't see why it's here, especially when you look at some of these other categories in the games that are there. I mean, for instance, like Immortality received so many high rewards and was received so well, and a lot of people thought it had a chance at Game of the Year, and it's received in a lot of other categories, but not in the Game of the Year category. I mean, even just right now, like best game direction, Immortality is there. Best narrative, Immortality is there. You brought up, we had the list before. Immortality has three different nominations. Stray has 6, which is obviously you got to give credit where credit is due for Stray pulling 6. But it's like it's just one of those things where it was really interesting that Stray is there, and I think a lot of people do like. As much as you had said originally it was Xenoblade, but I think it was just you didn't have the full context of the situation. A lot of people do look at Stray in that light that you thought Xenoblade, where it was like Stray was good, but like, why is that a game of the year category? Like,
yeah. Well, I didn't think so. To defend myself a little bit.
yeah,
I
you
wasn't
defend
saying
yourself right
that-
now.
First off, I didn't know the context of the JRPG thing. I will admit that. I didn't know that context. But I wasn't saying that they didn't think it should have been nominated for Game of the Year. It just seemed they were surprised it was nominated. They're like, yeah, it should be up there, but we just didn't think. I didn't realize it was JRPG context. I just thought Xenoblade was just never a game that was acknowledged. I didn't know there was more involved in that aspect. So,
Yeah.
in my small defense, not a great one, but like
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Now, I have a question for you, and this is more so just out of personal thoughts. Best ongoing. So best ongoing, I think, always changes year to year because it just depends on what people are feeling. You know, that flavor of the year, so to speak. I know, like, one year Final Fantasy 14 won, and I still think Final Fantasy 14 is one of the best ongoing games because of how they develop it and everything. But this year, categories are the nominees are Apex Legends, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, and Genshin Impact. And I wanted to ask you, as the lone Genshin Impactor here, do you think it actually stands a chance this year with whatever content dropped over the course of the year? When you think about the limelights that you might have heard with Fortnite, Final Fantasy 14, I mean, Destiny 2 released the Witch Queen earlier this year. Does Genshin Impact stand a chance in that category?
Honestly, it feels like this should be 2 different categories, honestly, looking at these nominees, right? Like, you have, like, Final Fantasy 14, Genshin Impact, and Destiny 2, which drop new content, like, periodically. I mean, they all drop new content, but what I mean by new content is, like, there's actually different things going on. Like, Fortnite and Apex Legends, like, yeah, they might drop a new map, and the gameplay might change slightly, but it's kind of the same kind of the same game. It almost feels like online multiplayer shooter or survival game, and then like continuous MMO. It's kind of a little odd they got to me personally. I don't know about to you that they got all these games coming together. In all honesty, I don't think Genshin Impact probably wins this award. I don't necessarily know how popular the game is as compared to the other ones, but Final Fantasy 14 is again one of those games that I played it for a while. I think at least a year, maybe more. Just not. Every time I try a new MMO, I give it time. It's a MMOs are to me are always fun when I'm with friends, and when I'm not with friends and trying to grind per solo. God, it's so boring. Even if I just throw on like some music or throw on a podcast and just listen and just grind, which I do basically in a bunch of other games, it just feels like it's just like this is like the same few things I'm doing constantly. But from everything I've heard, when was the last Final Fantasy 14? Like they dropped an actual like new game this year,
Oh,
right? Like I'm not.
Shadow Walker, I think came out.
Yeah, fine.
Was it June or was it last year?
Yeah, it was this. I'm gonna find out real quick. I could have sworn it was this year. I swear to God, it was this year. I'm gonna feel dumb if it's not.
I want to say.
uh, uh, shoot.
Here,
I
I'll
should
do it
have
real
his
quick.
info. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm usually better than this sometimes. Endwalker came out. Endwalker
Endwalker.
technically came out in December of last year.
December of last year. That's what I thought.
But it was December 7th, so I don't know if that counts. Does that count?
Well, technically speaking, which is actually brings up our next discussion that I do want to bring up. Technically speaking, Endwalker is eligible for Game of the Awards this year because it released after its deadline.
So we're gonna call it this year. Endwalker was like from everybody that I know that plays Final Fantasy 14 still, all friends and even people that aren't. Final Fantasy 14 blew it out of the water with their new content, and I can't. I understand it's a little biased in my reporting, quote unquote, because it's just my friends and people I've seen on social media and stuff like that. Genshin Impact is fun. It's awesome, but I think it's weird because I've had this conversation before with people. I think there's a lot of MMO players that are turned off by the gacha mobile game aspects, and there's a lot of gacha mobile game people that are attracted to it that are turned off kind of by the MMO aspects, so they kind of clash. Even though I think they're kind of really similar in a lot of ways, the way that things go, because they have a lot of like, oh, you got to log on to get awards, you got to do your dailies, and that's kind of like a lot of that. It's like they're into the both of them. Unlike in MMOs, like for Final Fantasy 14, for instance, where you can play whatever class you want, basically. Once you level the first one up, you can basically level up whatever class you want. You kind of at the whims of the randomness of the game, what characters you get for Genshin Impact. That's the mobile game aspect when you drop in like the roll for 10 characters and hopefully you get the one you want. So I just don't know if Genshin Impact is ever really going to be that kind of success story in terms of like getting a lot of awards. I just think it's hard for me to think that any game beats Final Fantasy 14 unless a lot of people that are fans of Fortnite are going to vote the hell out of that game. And that's, but I don't think I'd ever say, and I think even deep in their heart of hearts, even the people that love Fortnite wouldn't say Fortnite is I feel bad saying that. Fortnite's a better game than Final Fantasy 14 in this sense. I feel bad saying it because like people always have their best games, right? I feel bad saying it that way, but like I mean it in the sense of like if you put up two games next to each other, even if you have more fun playing one game, like we were talking about earlier with Elden Ring, like we can tell how well crafted it is, even if it doesn't necessarily mean it's meant for or it doesn't interest us. I think it's kind of like that, but maybe I'm wrong, and I feel bad saying it because like saying like, oh, your game sucks, which I'm not trying to say at all. Never been like an anti-fan of Fortnite. I just never been interested in that style of games really that much. The closest I got was, I guess, Apex Legends when a bunch of my friends and I were playing it periodically when it first came out. So that's kind of my input. I know I ranted on a little bit there,
Yeah, no, and
but
you're totally fine. I was curious because I agree with you what you started with, where like I feel like that category should really be broken up into multiple like subcategories, and I understand for the category, for the Game Awards, you gotta have a certain cutoff. You
time
can't have
limit.
like 100. Can't have 100 awards to hand out. You got
Got
to
a
have a
time
certain
limit.
cutoff. But best ongoing, as you said, like it is so vastly different between like what you get with Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, and Genshin Impact versus what you get with like Apex Legends and Fortnite. Let's throw Warzone in there, which just dropped Warzone 2.0.
Yeah.
Those games are so vastly different that I really feel they should be in separate categories. And just to also back what you were saying, what your friends were saying, just to give a quick synopsis or look, I mean, on Metacritic, Endwalker had a Metacritic of 92 on PC and 90 on PS5. Like it was universally acclaimed with how well it released.
Why the guy is running Final Fantasy 16?
Yeah, and I wish I had more time to get back into Final Fantasy 14. Like I understand for you, like of course you said it was tough to get through all those things, but like legitimately, Final Fantasy 14 has some of the best instances and boss fights and stuff that I've like in any MMO that I've played, and I've played a number of MMOs, and so like I absolutely love 14, and I wish I had more time to get back into it, but I just don't, because I got a job and some big boy things and a wife to handle. But it's one of those things where I agree with you. It should be separate. The one thing that I wanted to quickly bring up, because we talked about the Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker in a sense technically being eligible for this year's awards, a game that released this week, and it's because of timing, we got to make it pretty quick, but a game that released this week, Pentiment, which is an adventure video game from Obsidian Entertainment that was also published by Xbox Studios, came out, and again was very much lauded, and like so many people really, really enjoy this game. Has gotten so many raving reviews. It did not get nominated for any award. Now, a lot of people were like, well, it's probably because it just missed the cutoff. And in a sense, I would say yes, because all these nominees were announced on November 15th. However, on the website, the Game Awards cutoff for actual award nominees was today, November 17th. And so a lot of people were like, what the heck? Why wasn't Pentiment submitted? And so I want to ask you kind of in this, I know I need you to keep it short, but I'm going to kind of ask you two things. So one, do you think that it suffered from being released too close to the cutoff? But then secondly, how do you feel as a gamer knowing that the nominees were announced before the Game Awards even cutoff was taken place, because they had on their website the last time that any game released after this date is eligible for next year's, and before this date is this year's, and they announced it before even all the games of eligible released.
So I think a lot of these things kind of hurt a lot of the games. The game itself in question being released so close, I think really hurt it. It's just such a short time. I also assume like this is the first actually time I'm hearing of it outside of like I believe it was on our list. No, it would have been on our list last week because we didn't because you kicking ass with that Keyforge
Correct.
conference. We didn't have one. So this actually is the first time I heard about it. So I think that might have been part of it. I don't necessarily know the process of how they do these nominees. So hopefully this Pentiment gets some due next year. Personally, if it were up to me, this is just an aside, I would say the cutoff should probably be like November 1st. And November 1st and like all the holiday games for the holiday season 2022, just go on to the next year. Like it's whatever. To answer your other question, it didn't even dawn on me until you pointed out, why the hell would you have the cutoff be November 17th and then announce the nominees like November, what would have been 8th? when they announced it?
I think it was November 15th, or technically, I think it was on Monday, or November
Was it on
14th,
Monday?
November 14th.
Oh, it was announced this Monday.
So
Why did I think
it was
last week?
Monday, yeah. And
thought it was,
just to clarify, it was November. The cutoff is technically, it has it on the website under the FAQ. Games eligible for the Game Awards this year must be available for public consumption on or before Friday, November 18th at 9 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, that's weird.
And then they announced the nominees on Monday.
Yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't just why would you announce it that I thought it was last week, honestly, but yeah, still, like, no, why would you why would you have the cutoff for games like be 4 days after you made your announcement of your nominees? Would you change the nominees? Like, would you add one? Like, maybe like, oh, we're gonna leave a spot free in case one of these games comes up. Like, no, that doesn't make any damn sense. What the hell are you doing? That was I just assumed like all the cutoff was like before all these nominees were. That's kind of ridiculous. I would love to know let's just say I would love to know the reasoning behind that one.
Yeah, and I agree with you. So that's kind of why I brought it up, because a lot of people were like using it as an instance to kind of point out that Xbox really hasn't released many games this year, which is true. And the fact that basically they were like, well, this just goes to show, like, because I don't think technically speaking, and I could be wrong, I don't think technically speaking, an Xbox published game is nominated for any award. They're definitely not on the most nominated list. I mean, there's Sony Interactive with 20, Annapurna with 11, Nintendo 11, Bandai Namco 8, Riot 6, EA 5, Focus Entertainment 5, Finji 4, which I will admit I've never even heard of Finji before this, Square Enix 4, WB Games 4. Like, Xbox is not on this list, and so some people were pointing that as the issue, and then some people were saying, well, Pentiment released too late to be eligible for it, and then it was like, no, it technically released in time for it to be eligible. And so I agree with you. I don't know why you announce the nominees before your cutoff. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I would, similarly with you, I would love to hear with Jeff Keighley his thoughts on why that is the case, or why they did that.
By the way,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think I figured out why how many they figure out the most nominated. Finji's got 4 awards. Tunic like cleaned up a bunch. So
Tunic. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, they're a developer of Tunic. So a lot of these games might be like, oh, well, we have one game that did really freaking well, and that's why it's on there so much. So
yeah, I was like, I don't even know who Finji is, but they have 4.
Well, because I was curious, I was like, yeah, they have 4 nominees. That seems like a lot for some developer I don't even know off the top of my head. And I was like, oh, they had Tunic, and Tunic has a bunch. That I guess that makes sense. That makes the way that they most nominated feel a little less like impressive, because then it's just like Sony Interactive, like they had God of War Ragnarok, which had like 10 nominees. So it's like, okay, so half of those were one game. Like, I mean, made a great game, awesome, cool, but like not as impressive as like we had 20 games nominated. No, we had like 4, and one of them got 10.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, down in there, Horizon Forbidden West, like obviously that picked up a lot of nominations too. So it really comes down to,
it is an SIE game. Yeah. I was just looking at Sony Santa Monica for the one. I saw Guerrilla Games for the other one.
Guerrilla Games is the other one.
Probably like 2. They got like 17 between the 2 of them.
Yeah, but I would really want to know why that is the case. And I would hope that they adjust that in the future, because I think that it does cause too many issues in that regard, because I think it starts to warrant the question, which is some people are saying, is like, well, you release the nominees on the 14th and the game released on the 15th. Why? Like, was it you kind of jumped the gun and you didn't even give it a chance? And also for those that don't remember Pentiment, which is totally understandable because, of course, technically speaking, I don't think there was a whole lot of marketing done after it was announced. But Pentiment was announced at the Xbox Showcase this past summer as one of the numerous games that Obsidian Games is working on, and people got excited for it. And then, like I said, it's been received very, very well, and it's on Game Pass, so you can go check it out because, again, Obsidian Entertainment is an Xbox studio now. But what other games that you may want to play coming up later this year? I don't know. Pokemon comes out here in a little bit, and I'm going to tell you all about that here in a little bit with upcoming video game releases that you can drop your hard-earned cash on, and it starts with today, which obviously is tomorrow at the time of recording. But today, Friday, November 18th, we have Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales for PC. PID for Switch, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for Switch, Resident Evil 3 for Switch, The Dark Pictures Anthology, The Devil in Me for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, East 8 Lacrimosa of Donna for PS5, and then on Tuesday, November 22nd, you have Evil West, PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, Gungrave Gore, which is coming to Game Pass on PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, Just Dance 2023 for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC, Ship of Fools for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC, Saint Kotor for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. And then those that celebrate Thanksgiving, well, you could be thankful for a game that comes out on Thursday, November 24th, and that's Dysteria for PC. Pete, obviously with Thanksgiving week, there is a limited number of games coming out this week, but are any of these catching your attention?
I didn't realize, it didn't even dawn on me that was the reason why. There was like, man, there's only a couple of days. I was like, oh yeah, Thanksgiving, duh. So a lot of big beefers in this week. I didn't see that. A lot of big names, even though some of them are just like final ports, like Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales. The three I'm going to go to are first PID, which on Switch, which apparently was released on Steam in like 2012. So it's been around for a minute. Yeah. If it's the same game, which it looked like it was, so I hope I'm not like misunderstanding that. Like that'd be really bad. But that game looked kind of interesting. I wouldn't mind giving that one a try. Evil West, that was developed by Flying Wild Hog, which also developed Trek to Yomi earlier this year, which was a game I enjoyed. Not necessarily a game I would have bought, but a game that I was able to play on Game Pass, which was really fun. And so I would like to give that one a try. That one seemed kind of cool too. And then I said the best one for last. This is the one that like a lot of people are probably gonna immediately go to. You just talked about it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Just like probably going to be one of the biggest sellers, if not the biggest seller of the holiday season. It's fantastic looking game. Really annoyed that little kids nowadays aren't going to understand the crime of going through Viridian Forest and running into a bunch of trainers and monsters and having to barely just crawl their way to Pewter City as they get through the forest after having so many battles. But I mean, those are the olden days, kid. So those are the three I'm looking at.
Those are the old days. Yeah. Evil West has been one that I think looks pretty good. And obviously the Pokemon games, which I am a little concerned after some tweets that I saw today about the performance of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I'm a little concerned because Sword and Shield played really well, in my opinion. And from what everyone said is Pokemon Legends Arceus, that also played really well. So I'm a little concerned by it, and I'm hoping that a day one patch kind of fixes that. Not 100% sure. I want to say a shout out for East 8 Lacrimosa of Donna. I know it's the PS5 version, but like if you have ability to play that one, it is a fantastic game. Go pick that up. And then for myself, I do have to give some quick shout outs. Dark Pictures Anthology, The Devil in Me finishes the Dark Pictures Anthology. I don't remember what it's called when it's a 4-parter. Not a trilogy. Trilogy plus one is what I'll call it. There you go. Quartology. Trilogy plus one. It finishes that off. And I've enjoyed every one of the Dark Pictures Anthology. And then while some people may find these games a joke, I actually find them a heck of a lot of fun, and they're good exercise tools. Just Dance 2023. I look forward to eventually picking that one up when it's on sale and doing some dance nights with my wife as we always do. But yeah, I kept forgetting that Thanksgiving was next week. So
It's just my look. You're back in the workforce now, buddy, and especially like the what you had to do the last week. Which shout out to you, just in general. 41 hours. They better write you a good check for that. I'm not even kidding. But yeah, I mean, like I'm the same way. You don't have days anymore, man. You just have days that you work and days that you're off. You don't know what day of the week it is after a certain point, man. Especially when you work those kind of hours and you're working weekends. Maybe when you get back to a normal, like kind of 9 to 5-ish schedule, it'll be a little better, but it's not going to be the case for me.
Yeah, not for you, unfortunately. But we'll see how things go. But of course, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. If you don't, I just hope you have a wonderful week next week. Pete and I will figure out timing-wise of our next episode because, of course, with it being Thanksgiving, who knows if we're going to be able to record on Thursday or Friday. But we'll talk about that after the show. But, Pete, that is all that we have for this episode. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with?
So quadrilogy or tetralogy were the
tetralogy. That's the one I was thinking of.
Those are the words you were looking for.
That's why I kept thinking trilogy plus one. I was like, no, it starts with a T though.
I would not have guessed tetralogy, even though it makes sense when you see it. Anyway, final thoughts. Everybody, hope you same sentiments that Jeremy has. Happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate. Happy we have a great week if you don't. Have a great weekend if you don't. Have a great weekend if you do. Also, hope you enjoy the Game Awards. Go. I'll pick God of War. Go God of War. They're gonna win. They're gonna clean up. That's my hot take. Throw all your money at God of War, even though we're not betting on here. We certainly aren't cryptocurrencying on here, but throw all your money at God of War. So,
all right, Pete's all in on God of War. Well, we'll find out if that wins here at the upcoming Game Awards, which, for those that don't know, is going to be, and I'm trying to have this page really refresh. It happens in 21 days from this recording because it is not loading as fast as I wanted it to.
But it is December 20th. I think it's December 8th, right?
December 8th. You're right. All right, so that's going on December 8th. We'll probably have something for that, leading up into that episode. But everyone, that's all that we have here for the One More Game podcast. I've been one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, aka Darcy. This is the California Thirst Quencher, Pete Legia, and we really enjoy bringing this to you. So as always, everybody, stay hydrated, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep on gaming. We'll see you guys on the next episode.